Hi, AP students. We are piggybacking off today's or previous day's equilibrium notes. So you should have all this stuff filled out as we've gone through it. Okay, we're going to add to these equilibrium situations today and talk about why this equilibrium is such an efficient way to try to allow markets to operate. Okay, the government does do some things to try to prevent that. We are starting off right here, okay? Um, and we're looking at why prices are important, okay? So, um, anyway, we're going to get rolling here. I'm going to rip through these pretty quick. Make sure you pause if you need to. Starting off, here is a question, okay? And so, certain time periods, economies, face some pretty challenging situations. In the late 1970s, we had an oil embargo with the Middle East, and that created so an embargo is a situation where we refuse to trade with them. So we were unable to import fuel from the Middle East. This created a significant um, decrease in how much fuel we had available to the daily consumer. Okay, so one thing the government did was they tried to limit a person's buying. So they tried to keep the supply low, all right, to keep the price low. So rather than set the price, they tried to keep I'm sorry, not the supply low. They tried to manage people's demand. Okay, so they were trying to, again, decrease demand based on rules, right? And if you take on what we talked about the other day, okay, they were trying to keep the demand shifted over to the left, just saying I'm not allowed to buy certain things, trying to keep that price down. Okay, well, the problem with doing that with something like gasoline and probably really any product, obviously, they try to keep the demand and the supply down on illegal drugs, but people still figure out how to supply that and consume them. The challenge with trying to decrease demand in that way is that, especially with something like gasoline, our demand isn't necessarily always set by how much we want, right? Our demand for gasoline is going to look a whole lot closer to something like a vertical line, right? So our demand is going to be very inelastic. So I'm going to demand a very set amount. I've got to get to work. I guess you could decrease how much you demand if you like don't go on vacation and things. But again, it's very challenging to do that. And so even though they tried to decrease the demand and how much people needed or wanted, what we actually see is we start seeing people that didn't need 5 gallons of gas a day buying the maximum and then going and selling it on a black market. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about black markets as we move forward here and talk about why they form. At the end of the day, it's simply because people want the stuff, and at the same time, people are also willing to supply stuff illegally if that price incentive, their profit incentive, is high enough. All right, the next part here is I have you draw a supply and demand graph with a certain quantity and equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. You should draw something that looks like this. Make sure we're labeling everything. It says label your price at, what did I say, 10 bucks, and your quantity at 2,500. That's all you got to do right there. Okay, so it says set that equilibrium price right there. All right, so if we can look at those graphs, we're going to be in good shape. Hopefully, you're keeping up with the lectures and they're clear enough for you to understand. Obviously, if not, make sure that you are reaching out. Okay, so just a couple quick things to write in. Why our price is important. We've mentioned this with free markets capitalism. First of all, they give us some pretty basic information. Higher prices are going to create incentives to go to work and produce more stuff, right? We've got to earn an income. So the idea of capitalism, like, hey, listen, you make more money, you can buy more stuff, nicer stuff, higher quality stuff, whatever. We're going to call that. We're going to use that as a positive and say it creates incentives to do things. Um, we can probably most importantly respond to changing conditions, shortages, natural disasters. In certain situations where the fuel prices have gone way up, right? People are able to either stop buying it, right? We set the prices higher so people don't consume as much because there's not as much available. Maybe people decide to ride their bike to work, carpool, those types of things. If we're sticking on the to the concept of that embargo. And last, it's probably the only the setting prices is probably going to allocate our scarce resources about as efficiently as possible, right? Meaning that people that are going to want them the most are going to be able to buy them. People that are going to be willing and able to choose to buy something else, they are not going to buy them. So the changing of those prices is important too. Okay, so just to kind of give you a insight to what we're talking about today, if the government were to set a maximum price on something, okay, what would that look like on a graph? So if you want to pause it and think about what the answers are for these two questions, we're going to set a maximum price, meaning that we're not going to let the invisible hand work here, okay, meaning that we're going to, again, the government's going to not allow the market to work, okay? Now, if you're going to draw this, all right, a maximum price, remember, that's going to be a situation where the price can't go higher, okay? So your maximum price, we're going to draw on your notes here in a second, is actually going to be below the equilibrium price, meaning that I want the price to go up, but I am stuck, right? That's going to give us a quantity demanded. It's going to give us a quantity supplied. Okay, we're going to talk about that here in a second. Obviously, to get a little ahead of myself, if we set a minimum price, we're going to set it so it can't go lower, right? It wants to go lower. It can't get down to this equilibrium point. That's going to give us a quantity demanded and a quantity supplied. Okay, so if you're unsure on how to read those things on your notes, you need to go back and rewatch those videos from previous days. All right. So the government tries to do this, and usually at heart, they're doing it to try to help people out. Okay. And sometimes, hopefully, the government's always trying to help people out. And obviously, people are able to take advantage, and it's going to hurt some people in some cases. Hopefully, again, in the grand scheme of things, that the government is helping more people than it's hurting, I think is the hope that when we come up with these things. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about first, we're going to talk about price ceilings. And if you notice on your notes, I had you write on, the front page equal with the shortages graph to also see that. So I tried to save you some space there. Okay, you can kind of try to cram this in there at the bottom of your notes if you'd like. You can also reference what goes on the front page there. Okay, so let's draw this on a graph. Again, we're going to set a maximum price. Okay, so for whatever reason, here's our equilibrium price. This is what our market would set it at. This is what our market would set as the quantity. Okay, but we're going to set this maximum price, this price ceiling, down below the equilibrium price. Okay, max price. There aren't too many examples of this in you and I's daily lives. The best example that your book would refer to is there is a maximum price that landlords in New York City can set on their rental properties. Okay, so a maximum rent. All righty. Now, anytime we lower the price for something, right? We lower the price, our quantity demanded is going to increase. So that's going to give us a quantity demanded, and it's also going to give us a quantity supplied, obviously. In this particular case, our quantity demanded is bigger than our quantity supplied, right? And if you remember what we talked about from previous notes, that's going to create a shortage of goods. All right, too many people can afford what's going on. On top of that, too, okay, on top of that, too, is as that price goes down, remember, I'm going to lose my willingness to supply that product. Okay, so when we set a maximum price, again, below the equilibrium point, okay, it's going to create a shortage of goods. Now, if we set it up above the equilibrium price, and they might try to trick you with this a little bit, like if they set a maximum price, a price ceiling too high, it's going to be an ineffective price ceiling. That makes sense, right? Because if we set the maximum price higher than what the market sets it at, all right, it doesn't matter. The equilibrium is going to take care of itself, right? If we set the maximum price for school lunches at $15 a lunch, no one's going to buy them anyway. The price of the lunch won't matter. Now, if we set the maximum price of a school lunch at 15 cents, right? Now we might have more people willing to buy lunch. maybe we have less people willing to supply it in the grand scheme of things. That would be obviously an effective price ceiling. Okay. All right, let's flip it. Let's talk about a minimum price. Something that some of you may be way more familiar with, and at least a topic in today's news on a national scale, are price floors. Okay, and this is going to be a minimum price. All right, that's what you want to be able to keep track. And just like the price ceiling was set, okay, as a price that couldn't go higher, okay, a price floor is going to be set at a price that is too high, okay, where I can't set it lower. Well, why, what on earth would we set a price of that is too high? The answer to that question is potentially minimum wage, okay? Minimum wage, again, if we set this minimum wage higher than the equilibrium price for labor, okay, is an example of a price floor. Okay, so we've got a price floor, minimum price. Okay. So, kind of for example, if I were to say, hey, listen, I don't know how many of you have jobs, I can't see your hands, right? So, if I were to say, hey, listen, we were going to set minimum wage. Sorry, that's our quantity supplied there. Okay. This is our quantity demanded. If we were going to set minimum wage, let's just say at 30 bucks an hour, and everybody's going to have different reasons to go to work or not go to work as a high school kid, or even as an adult, but obviously you guys are high school kids. So if we were to say minimum wage is going to be $30 an hour, those of you that were not working, I would venture to say, like, you know what, for 30 bucks an hour, I probably would start trying to go to work. So you are the suppliers of labor. Remember, whoever gets paid for doing the job or doing something is the supply of labor. Now, the problem is as we set that minimum wage higher, right? Now companies can't hire workers for cheaper. Now they can't afford to hire as many workers. Okay, so if we set this price too high, and again, this is the graph for like labor. Okay, so what I get paid to do stuff. All right, our quantity demanded is less than our quantity supplied. This creates that fancy thing we talked about the other day. This creates a surplus. Okay, in this particular case, more people are willing to supply that stuff than are willing to demand it. Just like with our price ceiling, if we set this minimum wage too low, right, it's going to be ineffective. Now, some people would argue that in the state of Indiana, the minimum wage is set too low. If you ask around in Elkhart, nobody earns $7.25 an hour, right? I would be able to make an argument that we actually have an ineffective minimum wage here in the state of Indiana that we have a different equilibrium set, right? You could go work at Walmart right now for 12 or 13 bucks an hour. The equilibrium wage is somewhere up here. We have an ineffective minimum wage. Now, in some states, they're getting up to $15, $16 an hour, where now we might be saying, okay, they might have an effective price floor because their minimum wage is significantly higher than Indiana's. Okay, so anyway, that is what you want to be able to understand for price ceilings and price floors. Some things the government have try to keep prices as low as possible. They've rationed things out. We kind of mentioned that already. And we also know that black markets form in the case of products that are illegal, or the government says you cannot produce. All right. Okay. We're going to finish off here. Um, with some things that are a little bit trickier. Okay, just to kind of give you some a picture of notes that are sorry, a part of a video to help you understand what's going on when we are trying to answer these and before you get into the AP type questions. Okay, one way that the AP sometimes words things is they're going to ask you, all right, so we've got the price of cotton has gone down significantly. With that info, what would we expect the equilibrium price and quantity of polyester shirts, which are a substitute to cotton shirts, do? Okay, so I like to draw as many graphs as I can just to get good at it, to try to check my work. Okay, so we've got cotton as cheaper. All right, so cotton's cheaper. I'm going to connect the dots real quick, and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to buy more cotton shirts, right? For cotton shirts, we're going to see an increase in supply of cotton shirts as an input of production. So cotton shirts are cheaper. Cotton shirts are cheaper. So what's that going to mean for the demand for polyester shirts? How do I know it's demand? Well, I give you a buzzword right here, right? Our buzzword is a substitute. If you have those shifters in front of you, you know that that's a demand shifter. Okay, I'm going to buy more cotton. That means I'm going to decrease. My best guess is I'm going to decrease my demand for polyester shirts. Okay, and look, the question doesn't say draw the graph, right? The question asks you, what's that going to do to the equilibrium price and quantity for polyester shirts? Well, this is why I draw the graph. I try to keep things straight. Anytime I have a decrease in demand, my price is going to go down. All right. So now I've got price level. I've got decrease, decrease, decrease. Okay, I've narrowed it down to 3 possible answers. Okay, what's going to happen to the equilibrium quantity? It's going to decrease. I'm going to match that up with that, and my answer is going to be C. Okay, so you might be real good at drawing these graphs and doing those things, but you've got to understand what the graphs are going to show us. All right. I'm not going to draw another price ceiling. We just did 2 of those different things. Remember, price ceilings are below the equilibrium point. It's tricky, right? Okay, so that's a max price. Okay, so we've got some cases where things are double shifters. Okay, and the double shifter questions, the good news is that they're going to be extremely clearly written. So for the common example that they like to play is for an increase in demand. Okay, they like to throw in income. Okay, they like to use income. So we're going to say we have so we're on the top left graph of your notes. Let me show you. Take a quick second here. All right, so we're in the top left section of that last page of notes. So we're going to go this way. We're going to do both increases in demand, okay, and then we're going to do both increases in supply. Okay, I'm sorry. Then we're going to do the increase in demand, increases. Okay, yeah, I got all 4 there. Okay, so we're going to go increase. We're going to go left to right like you're reading a book. Okay, so first one, increase in demand and a decrease in supply. So here's what we're going to say for our notes. And now remember, we're only going to make guesses when we are absolutely sure of what's the outcome's going to be. Okay, so I already have labeled here, I already have my equilibrium price. Okay, I'm going to give you my equilibrium quantity. I always try to draw this stuff out, like I said, to try to keep things straight. And we said we have an increase in demand, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw this in. All right. So like I said, we used a change in income. So let's just say people are making more money, and I'm going to increase my demand. And I also have a decrease in supply. So I used the example of decrease in supply. I put natural disasters. I simply underlined it up there. Okay. Remember IRDL. Don't forget that, right? IRDL, increase right, decrease left. So I'm going to decrease my supply. Now, remember, we don't ever say how far these lines are going to shift. Okay. So theoretically, my supply line could shift right here. That would make my equilibrium point like right there. Notice where that is in relationship to the quantity equilibrium. Well, what if my supply line shifts like way out here, right? Well, where's that going to make my equilibrium quantity? Well, like I said, we don't necessarily predict how far it's going to shift. We just know that it's going to shift because we know the laws of supply and demand are true. Okay, so that gives us a new equilibrium point. Now, what it does absolutely tell us in this case, all right, is that it absolutely tells us because an increase in demand is for sure a raise in price. A decrease in supply is for sure a raise in price, but we don't know since quantities go each way, we don't know where that's going to end up. So our answer becomes actually more simple than you might think. We know our price is going to increase. However, our equilibrium quantity is going to be indeterminate. I'll try to write that clearer. Sorry. Okay, indeterminate. I'm just going to label it with a question mark to kind of simplify things, okay, as we kind of go through here. So anytime we have an increase in demand and a decrease in supply, it's going to be price goes up, our quantity is going to be indeterminate. Okay, let's knock these out and give you some notes that you can look at as we kind of keep things going here. All right, so we've got our next one. I have an increase in demand. I kept income as kind of my shifter here. I'm going to always label price, equilibrium, price, and quantity. All right. And we're going to take income. We're going to increase our demand with income. Okay. We've got an increase in demand. We know that equilibrium price goes up. We know that equilibrium quantity goes up. Okay. We're not going to write our answer yet, though. And what else? We've got an increase in supply. So remembering Ertl, increase in supply, maybe that means that we have, cheaper inputs. Maybe we had some really good weather. So increase in supply, we're going to shift our supply curve over to the right. We know that our new equilibrium point is going to be somewhere in this range. However, okay, we don't know, is it going to be, let's say, right here? Or is it going to be, say, like down here, depending on how far we shift our supply line? Okay, so we don't know on the price axis where it's going to end up. Okay, it's indeterminate for our price axis. For our quantity, though, we know that no matter where I go this way, right, and where I go this way, that our new equilibrium quantity is going to increase. Okay, two done, two to go. All right, we've got an increase in supply. I'm going to go through these a little bit faster. All right, so we're going to shift our supply to the right, increase in supply, and I'm just going along with your notes here. So whatever causes that, maybe we have more producers. I said a change in technology up there. But we also have a decrease in demand. Maybe we have all this new technology. Maybe we have all this new technology. However, all of a sudden, people are scared of COVID. And so they stay home and they don't want to spend money. So we're going to decrease our demand. Well, what's that going to do for our new equilibrium point? Again, it's down here in this area, right? So it looks like the demand's going to make it go down. The supply is going to make it go down. When I say that, the price is what I'm referring to. All right. Prices will become cheaper. However, we don't know where we're going to be at on this quantity axis, right? So we've got an indeterminate quantity. Okay, new equilibrium quantity. Last but not least, we've got a decrease in supply. Okay. Shift our supply to the left. All right. And we've got a decrease in demand. Okay, so we're going to shift our demand to the left also. Notice I'm labeling things as I'm going through. Anytime you draw a new supplier demand line, they want you to put a number by it. It's one thing to kind of get used to. That's how they know that it's a new one and not an old one, so to speak. Okay, so our price, again, in this case, we don't know how much we're shifting our price one way or the other. Our new equilibrium point can be any number of places over here, right? And so our price is indeterminate. Our quantity is going to decrease those equilibrium points. Okay, takes a little bit of practice. Again, as we are kind of getting through this stuff, the more you practice these, the better off that you're going to be. I appreciate you paying attention. I appreciate you grinding this out. And again, it's going to pay off in the long run as we keep getting better and keep practicing and set ourselves up for success on the exam. Okay, we'll talk soon. Have a good rest of your day, and don't be afraid to reach out if you need